While heights are still available to us here from the front view, I tend to minimize my consideration for them, at least in the beginning here. The heights are available from the front, but they are much easier to see from the side view. Currently, I consider the heights dealt with enough, and we're moving on to other issues in our work. We'll come back to the heights later, because there is no way we've gotten them as accurate as we'd like to. In our current pancake state, there is no way to be as accurate as we'd eventually like to be. Therefore, we will return to heights, but for now, let's ignore them. The same thing goes for depths. Remember that depths can't be observed, which is why we started from the side view, where we can observe depths, the depths of the nose or the depths of the face easily. Usually in a sitting portrait as left to right, but here, since the nose would be laying down on the table, depths become up and down from the side view. Depths can't be observed objectively. They can be felt in a way, but not observed objectively. From the front, the depths are finally actually depths and not up or down or left to right, and so because of this they are unobservable currently. We will therefore ignore the depths for now, but we will come back to those, the depths, later on in the video and readdress them, just as we will with the heights. What we've done so far in this piece or on this piece should currently be treated with some sense of respect. We can't simply alter things as we work, especially things that we can't see, like depths currently from the front. Even the heights should not be altered since we're not really thinking of them currently. Respect the work that you've done if you're not attempting to alter said work, that is. Respecting the work that came before does not mean do not attempt to change or fix the work that came before. It simply means do not attempt to make changes or do not make changes unless said changes are very intentional. Unintentional changes are the biggest issue, one of the biggest issues, for beginners, frankly. So keep this at the forefront of your mind. When you make a move and add clay or draw something on the sculpture, does it alter or change the work that you did before in a significant manner? This is going to become incredibly important in this nose feature and in every sculpture you do in the future as well. So from the front, we're going to attempt to bring another ball into the air and start juggling it. This ball is going to be widths. Currently, the nose is a pancake-like nose that's way too narrow, and as stated, this is on purpose, of course. We want to stay away from widths until the profile from the side view, the heights and the depths are established to a degree where we feel that adding widths to them is not going to cause any issues, not too much back and forth. The adjustments that are now needed to the heights and depths and to the profile need to be in the millimeter or below range ideally, and not centimeters and above, which is what it was before. In order to begin adding widths, it's good to get an idea for the target we're aiming for. I do not recommend going straight for that target, and we'll discuss that soon. But knowing how much width we are after is not a bad idea. We'll be using comparative measurements here, and since we have the heights that are well established, we can use them to compare our widths, our new widths, against. Always compare something that is visually clear and easy to see. In other words, find a width that's easy to see and compare it to the heights that you've established. A bad idea is to compare a random width that is very unclear, for example, taking a random width here in the middle of the nose and attempting to use it. That's not going to work very well. Take one that's visually clear and obvious. So for me, that's going to be the overall width of the nose at the tip, from the outside of one nostril to the outside of the other nostril. Take this width on your reference and flip it vertically. Count how many times this width fits vertically into the height of the nose you've established, and take note of whether or not it lines up with something that's visually obvious as well. For example, the width at the bottom of the nose takes me right up to about where the downward facing plane of the glabella begins. Knowing the names of these anatomical features is not necessarily needed, really, but having a good profile that has these anatomical features established in height, that is needed. We'll get into the anatomy of the nose at some point later in the video here, but I like to explain the procedure first, as it's not really based on the anatomy alone, but more so on visual observation. Knowing the anatomy and having some sense of terminology can help, however, so we will talk about that as well. With the width of the nose known and functioning with the height of the nose, we have some place to start. We do of course know where the base of the nose is as well, since we established that height from the side view. We also happen to know where the back of the nostrils sit in relationship to the tip of the nose from the side view. All this information now becomes important to not lose as we begin to add clay to the widths. A basic tip I can give you that so many new students tend to mess up on, as this is the first feature they will encounter in our program, is that they don't pay enough attention to symmetry. Make sure that at this stage, before beginning to add those widths, that there is a center line running down the center of the nose and that this center line is straight. There's usually some small asymmetries to be found in the nose, but it's usually not so much to do with positioning and more so to do with what happens in between major landmarks. For example, the bottom of the nose where it touches the face is usually pretty symmetrical with where the nose begins, at the brow ridge. It follows the center line, even though sometimes the nostrils or other features can be slightly asymmetrical, as we can see in our reference here. However, asymmetries are slight. Keep this in mind and maintain a center line. Symmetry is much harder to get, and the nose and the face at large are much more symmetrical than they are asymmetrical. So start with symmetry and introduce asymmetry later. A center line is going to be key for you to control this, both the symmetry and the asymmetry. So always have a center line present on your work until the work is done. It will afford you more control over your process. I also like to start around the center line. Building from the outside in is bound to cause issues in sculpture, in my opinion. So I think it's better to build from the inside out. As an example, once you're working on a full-scale portrait and you find the width of the nose, well then by default you can find the inside corners of the eye and where they sit left to right from the front view, as they tend to line up more or less vertically with the outside of the nostrils. In this example, the nose is a central feature and the eyes are not. So we start from the nose, knowing that it's the better place to start with less likelihood of being wrong because it's much closer to the center line. I also try my best to build the sculpture from the center out towards either side symmetrically. Often enough, people like to do one side first and then the other. I think it's better to try and do both at the same time and work them outwards from the center together in a symmetrical fashion. This way we can make changes to both sides, and those changes are going to be smaller in nature and therefore less likely to be noticeable in the finished product as major sacrifices. So get the center line on there right at the beginning of the day and do not lose it either. Always redraw it if it becomes lost during the process. Then work outwards from that center line to either side of it while maintaining your symmetry. While I measured and drew on exactly where the width of the nose was located or how wide the base of the nose is at the nostrils, I didn't immediately add the clay to get me to that width. I drew it on there and then I started adding widths little by little. The reason for this is because I'd like to get to my overall widths slowly over time, ideally over multiple passes on the front with passes from the sides in between. The reason for doing things this way, which is slower of course, is to maintain control over the process and control over what my sculpture looks like. We've worked hard to deal with heights and depths, and the most common reason those become lost and the drawing sort of falls apart is because too much width is added onto the sculpture at once. So a lot of widths added very fast has a tendency to ruin the accuracy of the heights and of the depths. You can always find them again, of course, but I do prefer to maintain control over my sculpture. Another reason to add the widths in multiple passes is that the heights and depths you've added so far are likely going to be somewhat inaccurate. They won't be as accurate as you would eventually like, and this is because when you added them, you were lacking in context. Your sculpture was flat as a pancake, and the degree to which the height and depths can be accurate on such a sculpture right from the get-go is going to be less than perfect. Not suited for a finished product, a finished sculpture, but well suited to add some widths to them and increase that context, so that we can make better decisions about our heights and depths. But definitely not suited for a finished sculpture. So by building widths in multiple passes, we can adjust the heights and depths in between the addition of widths, and hopefully make them more accurate. This is the best way that I've found of adding widths that continue to increase the accuracy of our work while not ruining the good work that we did before we got to this point in the process.